Welcome everyone, my name is Jared, or as I like to call myself, Orcadex, and today is the first episode, or I guess the second, if you can count the intro as one of the episodes, of how to become a successful YouTuber and just tips on how to grow your channel. Today, the subject we're going to talk about is computer specs. Now, I'm going to go over Windows just because if you're going to be a gaming YouTuber, which is how this is kind of themed, this is themed around tech and gaming YouTubers, you're gonna need to run on Windows if you want to play games. I mean, you could always use a console, but I'm not gonna talk about that. I'm just gonna be talking about PC. So this is gonna be a PC oriented. And now you could take this and turn it into a Mac if you want to make like a Hackintosh. This isn't really a building computer, but this is just what you want to look for, you know. So first off, sorry, I have my notes. If you see me looking down, that's because I have notes right here, so I don't stutter, I guess, or just space out. First off, what you'll want is a desktop over a laptop. If you have the choice, I would definitely do a desktop, not a laptop, just because they're more reliable. But again, let's say if you need an all-around computer, you might want to stick with a laptop. But if you're just gonna get a computer for content creation, I would go with a desktop. And I'll talk about a little bit more why in a second. But basically, you'll get more power and more reliability with a desktop if you're just gonna use it for content creation. There's kind of two sides to the desktops. There's AMD or Intel and Nvidia. Now AMD and Nvidia can mix sometimes, not often though. It tends to be Intel and Nvidia and AMD. Those are the two. Here, I'll put the images right there. Those are the two companies that kind of do gaming desktops or media creation desktops or editing or whatever, you know, those are the two companies. They don't make them, I guess. How am I gonna put that? They make the products that go into these desktops, and so they kind of make the components. Now, a bunch of companies will make these desktops. Like, they'll actually make the computers and sell them, or you can make your own like I do. And I will also give you guys my computer specs kind of during this video. So our first subject, or our first like bullet point, I guess I should say, is CPU. Now, you will want a 4 to 8 core CPU if you're going to be recording games and editing videos. You can do these on laptops with less, or you know, with CPUs and less. But if you're gonna record games and commentate, especially if you're using like Fraps or Dextor, you're really going to want a 4 to 8 core CPU just because the strain otherwise will be a lot, and the CPU just might not last very long otherwise. So some CPU recommendations I can give are an i3 3240, which is actually a dual core, but if you're going to go on a super low budget, you could go with that CPU. It'll be right there. Or I'm gonna stick with Intel and then I'll go to AMD. Or you can do an Intel i5 4690K, which is like the middle, which is right there. That's like the mid-range for Intel. And then if you really want to go professional, you can go Intel i7 4790K. So I have to look at my notes because that's a bunch of numbers and I can't remember those. And all of these are 4-core except for the i3, which is a dual core, and the i3 is like the lowest tier. That's just like the minimum you could use. Now for AMD, which is my preference, you can have an FX 6300, or what I actually use, and that's a 6-core, but what I actually use is an FX 8350, which is an 8-core CPU. It's probably about equivalent, but somewhere between the i5 and the i7, but it's 8 cores, which is handy for video editing and running Fraps with games, so like recording, because you have more cores to use. But each core is not as powerful as the Intel's, but you get more of a variety because you get more cores to use in different processes, so I can run more stuff at once. So that's my preference. Now the next subject is graphics cards. You'll definitely want a dedicated graphics card if you're going to be editing video and recording games, especially with commentary, especially just rendering in general. If you're going to render anything, you're going to want a dedicated graphics card. So I'll start with NVIDIA. NVIDIA and Intel are kind of, in my opinion, kind of partnered together, and then AMD is doing its own thing somewhere else, which is, again, my preference. You can start with a lower end GTX 740, and that's not really a low end card or anything, but if you're going to be playing games and recording and rendering video, you're probably going to want to start around a GTX 740, I think, and there's like numbers like the 690 will be better than a 740 if I'm thinking about this correctly. There's just the hundreds place, like the 7, the 6 are just the generations, and then the number after that is like the tiers, so 40, 60, and 80 or be like kind of the I think it goes by 2s normally. There's others in between, but those are like the 3 tiers that I know. And a 740 is kind of a lower end card. You can play games in like medium settings, 30 FPS, maybe some high settings, 30 FPS depending on the game, and recording. Fraps is heavy on the GPU, and so that might, and well, it's actually heavier on the CPU, I guess I should say, but a GPU will matter, and so that would be straining it. You won't be able to do 60 FPS, which YouTube is just allowed, and most YouTubers don't even use 60 FPS, so that won't really be necessary, and you could do that. Rendering will be a little slower on those kind of cards. What most YouTubers use, including Lewis from Lejar and Peter from Lejar, is a GTX 760, which is like the standard card. That's like the regular graphics card. That would probably be equivalent to like a Xbox One, I'm guessing. I think would be about what that card is, and so like, yeah, that would be like the standard amount of graphics, graphical settings, and that would get you 60 FPS on high in most games, maybe like 45, and then 30 on 720p. Again, all of these are talking about 1080p gameplay, just because you want to record in 1080p if you're going to be doing YouTube, just because if people have 1080p monitors, they look best at that resolution, and it just seems more professional if you go all through the resolutions. All of these cards will play 60 FPS on 720, but if you're gonna get a graphics card, 760 or the next one, 780, which is right there, will be the highest quality graphics. You can have high and ultra with a 780, 60 FPS, 1080p, and those will also render video the fastest. So for AMD, you can do R7 260X right there, and that is about the equivalent of a GTX 740. Those will, play games medium, some high, some low settings, around 60, 30 FPS, somewhere between there. It'll vary, and so that's like a low budget if you're gonna buy a desktop, and that's probably the minimum you want to do. Then you can move up to an R9 280X, which is again like the 760. That's like the standard Xbox One, PS4 graphics card kind of stuff. That'll be like equivalent to those, and you'll get 1080, 60 FPS. And then if you really want to get crazy, again like the GTX 780, you can get an R9 290Xs, which is what I have, and that'll play games at like 120 FPS on 1080p and render video lightning speed, just like the GTX 780, which I already talked about. Those are like the top tier cards, and those will be the best results for rendering and playing games and recording all at the same time. You won't really notice any lag with fraps or anything. So if you have the money, those are both like pretty expensive cards. I'll put the prices up because I don't know them off the top of my head, but you will get the best results. Now the next subject, I have to scroll down on my notes. RAM. You want to go heavy on the RAM. There's 3 options in my mind, which is 8 gigabytes, 16 gigabytes, or 32 gigabytes of RAM. 4 gigabytes won't work. You might be able to edit video, but playing games now, you really can't play games and run fraps with anything lower than 8 gigabytes, really. I mean, you could, but it'll be laggy. 8 gigabytes will play games and run fraps, but you will experience a pretty solid amount of lag with 8 gigabytes of RAM. But again, a lot of people's computers only have 8 gigabytes, and it is usable. It just won't be the highest quality possible. 16 gigabytes is what I use. That is kind of that's like the perfect medium, where it's not too expensive and not too crazy, but then it is good for video editing and recording and playing games all at the same time, just because you have a lot of extra memory to throw around to different processes. Let's say I need to have my fraps, my game, and maybe my webcam running. 16 gigs will do all that for me. I don't have to worry about it, and I'll still experience a little bit of lag, but it should handle it pretty well. Now, if you want to go crazy, 32 gigs of RAM will definitely suffice. You will, that will just power through everything. You'll never experience any lack of RAM, but it'll be just crazy expensive, so that's overkill. But if you have the money, go for it. I mean, you know, can't stop you. Now the next and the final, I guess the final thing will be hard drive space. Fraps and video editing requires a lot of hard drive space, so I personally use an SSD for my operating system, and that's it. I just have it running off of that, so that way while I'm recording, it minimizes lag between the operating system and fraps. So I use a 250 gigabyte SSD to start with, which is right there. You could also do a 500 gigabyte SSD, but that's a little crazy just for an operating system. I run just all my video editing programs on that and my operating system, and then I have a gaming hard drive, which is I would recommend 500 gigs and 1 terabyte, just because games take up a lot of space if you're going to be doing PC games. They're like, some games can be like 34 gigs, and that's, you know, so you'll run out of space pretty quickly with anything under 500 gigabytes. And then for media, I have a 1 terabyte drive, but I would recommend somewhere between 1 to 2 terabytes for Fraps recordings, because Fraps recordings are massive. They're huge. So and since you might want to stockpile recordings or make montages, you're going to need a lot of hard drive space. So I'd recommend like Western Digital. What the hell? This is all kind of expensive. I'm saying, again, this will be expensive. I'm saying this is if you have the money and you want to, you know, get professional with your content creation, this is what you want to do. So if you have an SSD, 250 gigs to 500 gigabytes, between that just to run your operating system and your programs, then I would recommend a 500 gigabyte to 1 terabyte hard drive for your gaming. I put all your games on Steam, Origin, what are some other ones? Battle.net, all of your games from those, I would put them to that hard drive. And then I would have another hard drive for recording and other media, like for my camera. That would be between 1 terabyte and 2 terabytes, which I would save a lot of my best videos just in case I want to make montages, or just might use that in the future for like channel trailers and stuff. I'd save your best content, and especially I'd always save your camera footage, because that might be good in a portfolio or something. So yeah, I'd recommend the 3 hard drive setup. That's what I have: the SSD for your operating system, a medium-sized hard drive for your games, and then a large hard drives for all your recordings and media. That is the best, especially that reduces all of your CPU usage and disk space for various things, and it decreases lag between fraps and games, because if you're running your games on 1 hard drive and running fraps on your SSD and then recording to a 3rd hard drive, it actually reduces lag and reduces computer slowdown, because they can allocate space to different things, and they don't all have to do it at the same time, and it'll make your hard drives just last longer since they're not doing so much work all at once. If you have 1 hard drive for everything, which I had originally in my first YouTube channel, and when my hard drive died, that's actually why I deleted it. I had 1 hard drive of 1 terabyte doing everything: operating system, fraps, and games, and it just died in about 3 months. So I did 3 months of recording and then it died. So you do save yourself money in the end if you start out. You save yourself money and time if you start out with 3 hard drives, because your hard drives are less likely to crap out soon. And then that's just better. You don't want a hard drive to die unexpectedly. That's the worst. When it happens, it's just devastating. You might lose what you're working on. You might lose game data. You might lose all sorts of stuff, and you don't want that, you know. And so I would recommend 2 to 3 hard drives if you're gonna get serious about content creation. Now, to power all this, you're gonna need a 600 or more watt PSU. So I'd find a computer definitely with a large power supply, because if you're doing all this at once, it's going to use some power. It really is. So make sure you look at that. Now, thank you all for watching. This has been recommended computer specs for content creation. Remember, this is just episode 1 besides the pilot. There will be many more episodes in this series. Please subscribe to my channel and share this video for more. It really helps me. I love your guys' feedback. Thank you all. Please subscribe, comment, and like. Goodbye.